Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and today I'm joined by Mike Berland, former. It's a long list, actually, Mike. So you are definitely an Iowa caucus, but not just Iowa caucus, but pollster, political strategist, Superman, Clinton strategist. You work with Mayor Bloomberg. You work with, of course, both Clintons. I think Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. Thanks for coming on the Iowa Podcast, Mike.
Thank you. And now I'm a senior partner at Penta. So moving in the right direction.
Yeah, now senior, and that is can you describe what basically Penta is a stakeholder? It's a stakeholder comms company. Is this kind of what it is?
It's a stakeholder management group that is data first, and that's going to be very important as we talk about today, because my whole career and what we do now is all starts with data. And in presidential politics, it all starts with data. Right.
And so, of course, you obviously sold your other firm. Really quick disclosure, we worked together. You were a client of mine when you were at Decode M, but I actually met you because of the podcasting stuff, which is really, really interesting. And of course, you sold that company to Penta.
Yes.
But, you know, the big question I think is on a lot of Iowans' minds specifically is AP called the Iowa caucuses within 30 minutes. This is at the time when I was just talking with some Iowa voters this morning. This is when a lot of individual caucuses and caucus locations across the state were still discussing rules on how caucuses work. So how is it possible that the AP, and, you know, looking back, they were accurate, but how is it possible they could make a call within 30 minutes? And of course, is that a record?
Well, look, Justin, the first thing that we know in presidential politics is you always want to be first. First to call it is a thing, and it's a race to the front. This year, calling it as fast as they did violates every principle of you got to let the people vote before you call it. And I think what's going to come out after this, like we had in the network news where they couldn't call a presidential election until all the states had voted.
Right.
We're going to have a rule that comes out of Iowa saying you can't call the caucus over before every caucus voter has voted.
Yeah.
And you'll remember in the last caucus, they couldn't call it for days.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So this is just another overreaction, and yet again, a rush to declare something that has a longer term meaning than the 30 seconds that they took to make a rash call.
Now, the ethical concern is one thing, right? Because obviously it's the AP. You can't make a law about a free press. You can't tell them when or when they can't call things. But you'd think that in the past, the GOP chair called the race too early. I always forget the dates. I think it was 2016, or they called it for Mitt Romney. It was actually Rick Santorum who won. So they got kind of their hand slapped. There was the Democrat kerfuffle that led to Joe Biden and the Democrats leaving the Iowa caucuses. So you'd think those lessons would be strong lessons, but apparently we're still doing this.
Welcome to politics. It's allowed to be messy.
Yeah. So
that's the one thing. If we have one theme for today, it's allowed to be messy.
Sure. Obviously they had to have a good idea that Donald Trump was going to win, which, early polls showed that he had an extremely commanding lead. But as you know, the Iowa caucuses throw curveballs sometimes. Is there some type of process? Is there some type of technology? Is there some type of data set they had that when they saw a few exit polls in key counties, they were basically looking at historical trending data and they were like, that pretty much does it. We know from history if these counties have this early result, that means this person won? Because I think at that time, the GOP's official map had only counted about 200, maybe 400 votes at that point. So did they have some process? And can you give us a look into what that may have been?
They will be doing entry polls to find out as people are going in, who they're leaning towards or who they're committed to. They would have this strong polling that came out on Saturday that showed that Trump had a commanding lead. And I think that we see two candidates below Trump that don't really have that much momentum. And if they do, one's going south and one is moving up, but it's not really in a significant way. So that's what you have. You have a clear front runner. You have two candidates that we can't find any evidence that they're getting, and so they make a call. And the fact that it was an historic victory, not even close to the margin of error in the polling, and then in the entrance polling, they feel pretty comfortable about that. It was very unlikely that Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley were going to come out and overtake him, and I think that's the call.
Yeah, and I want to talk about polling and do polls work. You have an incredible perspective on this. We've talked about this before, but really just because you said that, though, I want to jump to, does Donald Trump have any, because the spread, I think a contested primary in Iowa, I think Jeff Kaufman, the Iowa GOP chair, last week said the record spread for a contested primary is 12%. So obviously Donald Trump is way out ahead of that. So at this point, is it a foregone? Is it basically Trump's game? Is Trump essentially, unless he screws something up, going to be running against Joe Biden again?
Well, let's not even talk about Joe Biden yet. Let's just keep it to Trump. I've been working in Iowa for more than 4 cycles. Iowa does not represent the entire country. You had a small sliver of Iowa Republicans who came out. What we are seeing, however, is that Trump is running a disciplined campaign. He is running like a businessman. And what I mean by a businessman, in business, you let your competitor or your opponent speak first, and then you respond, which gives you perfect control. In politics, you speak first and others have to respond to you. Right now, when Donald Trump is the leader, he's letting his competitors do all the talking, and he's responding and he's dismissing them, and he's showing that true leadership. And his competitors are not saying that Trump policies are wrong. They're saying that they're going to keep them going. They're just saying that maybe we need a different leader. And what we're hearing very strongly is if you want Trump policies, you should have Trump the leader to implement them. That is coming through loud and clear.
I seem to remember that last campaign cycle, and he broke from that pattern this year, I think, but last campaign cycle, he seemed to allow others to attack him first before he went after them. Of course, this time, I think he did start going after DeSantis early when DeSantis, I think, like last year, this is way before Iowa caucuses, but DeSantis wouldn't even acknowledge him until I think he started to really campaign. Then that's when he, was left with no choice. But it is interesting that, is this why perhaps Trump is doing so well? Because he's kind of taking a page, maybe just a page, out of the Joe Biden limit exposure playbook?
I don't think he takes any pages out of the Joe Biden handbook. But what he does is he's been a very successful businessman. He doesn't negotiate against himself.
Interesting.
So that's what I'm talking about. Is like he doesn't have to. They're not saying they're not criticizing his policies. The only criticism he's getting is in the department is in the Justice Department, where he's indicted in New York and in Georgia and Arizona and all the different places. that he's facing lawsuits, and so in the political, he's letting his policies and his leadership speak for themselves.
So I mean, one of the things that you talked about is people talking about continuing Trump's policies just without Trump, and we saw, I think during that final debate, Ron DeSantis say the same thing. He said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure he said I'm also going to build the wall and have Mexico pay for it, but I'm going to get it done." And I was like, dude, you're pulling this didn't work. This President Trump did not get it done, but you think you're going to get it done? I thought that was, right. It was crazy to me to see people just not say Trump's policies were bad. They like, to your point, that was surprising because normally we see that.
I don't actually understand how you can get elected. This election is about having a vision for the future of the United States with very real issues in front of us. And so you need someone who you can believe in the leadership. And so a strong leader has to have a vision and to take charge. And right now, if you want Trump policies, you should elect Trump.
Yeah,
and we're gonna see something different in New Hampshire. I think as we get to New Hampshire, which is a very different voter mindset, you'll have a electorate. It's an open primary, which means Democrats and independents can jump in. I think you're going to see a more diverse electorate come in, and we'll see a much tighter race, and that's when we're going to see what the appetite is for a competitor like Nikki Haley. I think Ron DeSantis just sort of took himself out of the race with his Florida legislative session, which is out of sync with most American politics. But we'll see Nikki Haley, who is a very competent governor. She has an accounting background. She's a military family. She was the ambassador. She has a very strong background. She's a very compelling person. And as people get to know Nikki Haley, their confidence in Nikki Haley is going up. The question is, can Nikki Haley offer us new ideas that build on the Trump accomplishments, or is she still implementing the Trump ideas just without Trump?
Right. So you mentioned a few things there. You mentioned vision for the country, and this is one thing that I was discussing with the Des Moines Register. You're very familiar with the Des Moines Register. After the Drake debate, they were asking my analysis on that debate, and this is one of the things I told them, which was none of them seemed to have this strong statement that this is who I am. With the exception of DeSantis, he kind of has here's my record, I'm proven, but then that goes all over the place. And so Trump really has those he has that simple messaging down. He keeps his talking points very focused and simple. But in that final debate, DeSantis and Haley were all over the freaking map. So are you telling me that voters noticed that stuff? Like DeSantis and Haley's messaging was confusing, and it perhaps lost them the Iowa caucuses, but because Trump's messaging is so focused that's helping him.
I think, yes, Trump having, he's no longer an outsider businessman trying to become a politician. He's an ex-president of the United States with a record that he can point to, with a vision that he wants to complete. And for Nikki Haley and for Ron DeSantis, they would have to prove that they're capable, and they have to have a vision that's different. And so the way that you build trust is you have to. The trust equation is very simple. I'm going to give it to you.
All right.
It's trust equals vision for the future times confidence that you can actually get it done. And And so if you want to get the trust of a voter, which is a vote, right? You have to have a vision for the future and the confidence that they can get it done. And right now, to Haley and DeSantis, mostly Haley, I think she's got the biggest chance here. You have to have a vision and give voters the confidence that you can get it done. And while Trump is highly polarizing, people are confident that he can get things done,
right?
Because he did get things done in his first term. You might not have liked them all, but he got things done. He lowered the economy. The economy was roaring. He people feel that he had a strong stance on national security. He was dealing with the issue of undocumented workers and illegal immigration. Like, he was taking a stand on those issues.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah. And it's trust is vision X confidence. And
yes,
I feel like both really did struggle with vision, DeSantis and Haley. Maybe DeSantis kind of touched on confidence to get things done, but to your point, that's not enough. You got to have the vision too, and it seems like that's where both struggled. So do we look at this now, and at least the Iowa caucus, as you know, well, first let me back up. I'm going to ask you about the polling, but let me back up because you have a completely different perspective on the purpose of polling. I think most people assume the purpose of polling is so that we can predict the future and predict what's going to happen. But I've talked to you before about this, and that's not how you use polls. Can you explain that?
Yeah, polling, let's go back. If we want to go back 50 years ago, when the best way to find out what was going to happen, we asked people, and they told us that was old school polling, and that was predictive because we asked them what was going to happen, and we collected those, and we had a very good prediction. Now we don't have to ask people what's going to happen. We can see it in the data. Our Penta Live data at my company, Penta Group, we could predict the Iowa caucus just based on social media analytics through Penta Live. We perfectly called the race. We didn't have to do any polling. They came through Penta Live. And that's the future of the what. What polling is good for is the why. Why do you feel this way? What are your why are you choosing this issue? That's still very good for polling so people can explain themselves. But the what is going to happen is no longer valid in polling because we can't get to a representative sample that's large enough. It's too diverse. It's much better to see what people are doing, and then we can look at we call the visibility metric. We can look at that metric and have a very good prediction of what is going to happen.
So it's more like, and if I'm wrong on this, correct me, but it's more like taking the temperature. When you say certain things, you do a debate, you make certain stances, you look at the polling and see, do people feel that way? Did that resonate, and why? That's how candidates are essentially using it.
It's the best. It's the best. Polling is perfect for why. Why is this happening? Why do I feel this way about a candidate? Why is this an important issue to me? Why is this brand? Why do I choose this brand over that brand? Those things are really perfect for that.
So then it's within the candidate's best interest to really listen to what that story is and why people are polling the way they are. Is that typically where candidates kind of lose it? Is they do the polling, but then they fail to ask why people polled that way, and they just kind of they miss the message?
Yeah, the why. You get obsessed with the what. The what you can look at social media analytics any day. Understanding the why and how to change those perceptions is important. Justin, we've talked about it a long time. We know that running a political race is all about having momentum, and momentum is mass times velocity. At some point, these candidates get plenty of mass, so it's the velocity, which is the engagement on the issues that matter, and finding ways to increase the energy in which their issues are being talked about, their plans are being discussed, right? Because if you have to have maximum momentum on election day to win. And what we clearly see here, and this is why Trump is a momentum master, he did pretty well in Iowa.
Yeah, that's an understatement. I think 51%. I'm assuming that's a record. Is that right?
He did pretty well. I mean, he played that well. And you also have to give Nikki Haley some credit of some a late surge, a last minute run.
True, yeah.
At the end, where she came out of nowhere to tie DeSantis, and she has pretty much run DeSantis out of the race. He will stay on because he marginally came in second, but he's wounded.
So this is interesting because most Iowans, and you are right, Iowans don't actually, like the Iowa caucuses rarely predict a presidential winner. What Iowans are good at, though, is putting candidates through the ringer and seeing how they do on issues. We're also really good at, Barack Obama elevating voices that previously people thought had no shot, right? So that's what Iowans are extremely good at. We don't necessarily pick the president, but what was interesting is You're saying, I think most Iowans are probably a little confused by this because here we have DeSantis get number 2, but you are pointing to Nikki Haley's momentum based on that polling makeup, the fact that she was so far behind and closed that gap quickly. And Ron DeSantis, he was ahead, but he didn't really have a lot of, as you said, he has almost no momentum. His polling numbers aren't really moving that bit. They're a bit stagnant. So for political strategists and pollsters, that tells a big story.
That tells us the biggest. That tells us the biggest story. You've got to come out of Iowa with momentum. That's all you need. And if if you don't have momentum, I mean, you can be close to death. And that's the issue. And then New Hampshire becomes a place where the comebacks are needed, right? If you think back to the Clintons, the comeback kid, like there's or George Bush. There's so many who you have to come out and then really prove some momentum in New Hampshire, or you're dead. My feeling is, yes, DeSantis is very alive coming out of Iowa, but what is going to happen in New Hampshire? We don't see any evidence that he maintains his second.
Wow.
We think it's gonna slip based on all of our visibility analytics. So now you have, let's go through a scenario.
Yeah.
Trump stays number 1 in New Hampshire. Nikki Haley closes the gap. The story is not Trump number 1. The story is Nikki Haley closes the gap.
Yeah, true.
As she's moving. Now let's play it further. We're going into, I think, Nevada is next, right? And then you have Michigan. So what happens in those states? And then you get to South Carolina. What happens in those states is Nikki Haley able to stick with Donald Trump? If she is, she's looking strong, and it's a two-person race.
Mm-hmm.
If she can't, it's over, and Donald Trump is going to be elected, is going to be the candidate of the Republican Party.
So you think there is a path here for Nikki Haley to become the nominee? For
sure. It takes, but it's not easy.
Right.
I would put, I mean, it's not as bad as the Eagles did yesterday against the Buccaneers, but I mean, it's, it's 3-1, 4-1 against.
That's okay.
The issue is Trump is a leader. Americans want a vision for the future.
Yeah.
There's a pit in Americans' stomach. Americans don't like upset stomachs. They look at the pharmacy. We have all these medications to make your upset stomach feel better. There's something wrong. They can't put their finger on what it is.
Mm-hmm.
The issues that we're facing are issues that Donald Trump has had some success with. And so with the Republican Party, and I'm not talking about the general election, but with the Republican Party, they may feel that Donald Trump is their best candidate going forward.
And is that just familiarity? Like we know what we got, and just economically speaking, microeconomically, individual households just felt like things were better when Trump was president, even though he was kind of a chaos agent. I'm not speaking for the country. I'm just speaking about what I've heard. Is that kind of why people are just like, we just want some stability? It's hard to say Trump is a stable candidate because he's.
Well,
is it just like I don't like the way things are now, and I want to rewind the clock just a little bit?
Look, this is my analytics and not my ideology.
Oh yeah, totally.
I want to be very clear. This is, it's again, Americans, particularly Republicans, are in a mindset of they don't really know what happened in 2020, right? It's all been thrown into something else that's chaos. Of course, nobody's proud of January 6th, but that's we've been talking about 4 years ago for 4 years.
Right.
Americans have very little patience and tolerance for talking about the past. They really want to talk about 2025. Who is talking about 2025?
Yeah. So I want to shift gears a little bit here because you've seen it is, by the way, interesting that you see the momentum of Nikki Haley when third place. I think most Iowans are kind of like, what? How do you recover from that? But I think she was polling second this week in New Hampshire before the caucus results. But what's your what's the internal dialogue, the internal reaction? I know that you've spent time with Hillary Clinton. What goes through candidates' minds when they kind of faceplant during the Iowa caucuses? We saw Vivek, of course, drop out. He didn't get above 8%. Right. But what are some of those stories you've seen, kind of that beneath the surface layer that you've seen? Like when what are the candidates going through right now? What's that struggle look like?
First of all, they're exhausted because so much work gets front-loaded into Iowa. It's a big state. It's very hard to get large groups, so they do a lot of small group meetings. They have been up all night for weeks. And it's the weather. You're there. It doesn't sound like the weather's that good.
It's not great.
So it's freezing cold. So they're wiped out. They are on a flight at 2 a.m. from Iowa to New Hampshire. And they are already campaigning at 8 a.m. in New Hampshire.
Wow.
As if Iowa didn't happen.
Yeah, it's just on to the next thing. And
you do not take a victory lap, or you do not do a post-mortem of what went wrong. You just go forward. So the campaign had a call at 7 or 8 a.m. and said, this is the plan. And each state wants its own primary. So
right.
New Hampshire doesn't want to talk about Iowa. They want to talk about New Hampshire.
Right.
So that's what's going on. There is very, I would suspect in the Trump campaign, they're saying, hey, we're on track. And remember, the Trump campaign is so different than 2016. In 2016, Donald Trump had a business, and it was and running for president was a marketing exercise that he did very well. And if he didn't become president, it would help his business. In 2024, he's already been president. If he doesn't become president, he might go to jail.
Interesting.
So this is a much more disciplined Donald Trump.
Oh, you think all the court cases
he knows what's at stake.
Interesting. So you think all these court cases, you think there's some legitimate fear there, and that is making him run a more precise campaign?
Fear is not the right word. I think there's a legitimate, if he loses, he's a lot more vulnerable.
Sure.
I'm not weighing in on if they're right or wrong.
Right.
I'm saying he's as president, he's not vulnerable at all.
Right. What was the reaction? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but you were very close with Hillary Clinton when she lost the Iowa caucuses to Barack Obama.
Yes.
What was what was like this? I know that you have some personal anecdotes. I'm not sure what you're able to share, but can you share any personal anecdotes of her reaction before we close out the show when that happened? And it might give us some insight into what other candidates are feeling right now.
Hillary was completely blindsided. She did. That was one of the worst. That was one of the worst calls the day after. The day after that group call was dead silence. Like I said, everybody was exhausted. And remember, they came in third.
Right.
Just utter disbelief. And Hillary, being the strong leader she is, took it upon herself. She didn't want excuses. She wanted a plan to go forward. And she got into New Hampshire, worked her tail off, and she won.
Yeah.
We had a political plan ready to go. We had direct mail and advertisements ready to go. And she hit the ground running, but she did not blame others. It was quiet on the call. I don't think anybody wanted to talk. And Hillary said, I'm just going to do this myself.
Before I let you go, Mike, obviously I appreciate all the time and all the insight. Can you share the Hillary Coffee Shop story, or do we have to save that for another time?
Oh, save that for another time, because I'll say this, Justin. There is a flood of emotions. Iowa, and I hope for all the people who live in Iowa, Iowans are just so patient and so tenacious and so good at what they do at interrogating candidates and really making sure that they're up for the job, that when you come out of Iowa, you have left everything in the state. And yet the next day you have to perform in New Hampshire. It's hard.
Yeah.
So what Hillary did was that outpouring of emotions. Sometimes you just can't control it.
And we will try to get into that next time we have you on the show. Mike Berlin, partner at Penta Group, and of course, Clinton strategist, worked with Mayor Bloomberg, with Bill Clinton, White House, Hillary Clinton, all over the place. Thank you so much for spending time with me and the listeners on the Iowa podcast.
Thank you, Justin. We'll be doing the New Hampshire podcast.
I guess tune in next time, people, for the New Hampshire podcast. Thanks again, Mike.
Welcome.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa podcast.